So last year, because of COVID, we have a lot of new things happening, such as work from home, CERB, the new revamped EI, CRB that came after, and a bunch of other benefits. So as we head into the end of RSP season and the beginning of the tax filing season, many people are wondering what is going on with the tax this year, how is it different from last year, and what should they watch out for. So for this week, we're going to jump into this and talk about what are some major changes, especially when it comes to claiming your home expense that you need to watch out for. And I'll wrap up by talking a little bit about RSP because a lot of subscribers were asking, should I buy RSP? How should I use RSP? Etc. Now, so without further ado, let's jump into today's video. Alright, so before we start, just a quick reminder, we have actually launched our second channel, which is focusing on building a side hustle and business. So in there, I'll be sharing all the tips, mistakes, lessons we've learned in the past 6 years that help us build our business into a deep six-figure business system. So if you're thinking about starting your own side hustle or business this year, check out the video and channel I posted right here. Now, first, let's start with some disclaimers. Number one, there are actually more tax changes and little credits that you can claim when you're filing your tax. Now, because most of these things may not be applicable to majority of the people, I'm not going to talk about it in this video, but I'll provide a link in description below that takes you to websites that talk about a full list of this if you want to read up on it. Which brings me to the second disclaimer is I'm not a qualified accountant. Everything I talk to you guys here is just based on my readings online and talking to other accountants. These are my interpretations. So as always, before you decide to do something, consult your own accountant or at least do your own very research. Okay, so here let's talk about some major things we need to watch out for this year when we're filing tax. Now, number one, let's get the CERB repayment problem out of the way. So last year when people were applying for CERB, there was a section on CRA website that says you have to make more than $5,000 a year to qualify before you can get CERB. Now, this is not a problem for most people, but for self-employed people, they assume 5,000 meant 5,000 gross income when CRA actually meant 5,000 net income. Now, because of this, a bunch of people who didn't qualify for the net income amount ended up getting a notification from CRA saying that they have to repay some or all of the CRB, and there were news reports saying people were paying upwards to $14,000 in the CRB that they claimed. This obviously caused a huge fuss, and I think there is even a class action lawsuit going on with CRA about this. But at the end of the day, what CRA did is they said that, okay, you know what, let's forget about it. No one has to pay back. Okay, so if you don't qualify the 5,000 net, you don't have to pay anything back. However, you still have to report that on your tax filing and pay tax on it. So which brings me to the second big thing is claiming your home expense. So this is a huge change that is temporary and only for last year as of this moment. Basically, due to work from home, a lot of people can't go to the office and they had to spend a lot of expense working in their home. So CRA have a new rule allowing basically anyone who qualifies to claim their in-home expense for tax filing this year. Now, they've actually made a whole new website just talking about this, so I have linked in the description below, a direct link into this website. But for today, let's still go over everything together, look at the different methods of claiming, and let's talk about which method is suitable for who. So basically, there are two methods. The number one is the temporary flat rate method, and number two is new option to claim actual expense. And for this option, they have also opened up new eligible expense that we'll talk about later. So first, let's start with the easy one, which is the temporary flat rate method. Now with this method, basically you can claim $2 per day that you worked at home for a maximum of $400, so maximum of 200 days last year. With this method, you're not going to write off anything that you actually spent. You're just going to take $2 off per day that you worked at home up to $400. Now let's first talk about the eligibility. You have to meet all the criteria as following. Number one, you worked from home during the COVID-19 period. Now if you choose to stay at home when you could have went to the office, it will still count. You have worked 50% of the time at home for at least 4 consecutive weeks. Number three, you're only claiming home expense and not other employment expense. And number four, employer did not reimburse for all your office expense. Now, if they have reimbursed some of it, you can still use this method. It's still okay. If you qualify for all the criteria above, you can use this method. But if you're not sure whether you qualify or not, because some of the criteria you might be borderline, I've also included an extra link in the description below that takes you to the example at the bottom of the page where CRA lists out in what situation do you qualify and what situation you may not qualify. So if you're not sure, check that out. And lastly, obviously, workday only counts for the days that you actually did full-time or part-time work. All the other days like vacation, rest day, they do not count. So make sure when you do your calculation for the $2 per day, you only count the days that you actually did work. Okay, so let's talk about how to claim. Now, this method is extremely easy. You or the tax filer, whoever is doing your tax, can simply enter the amount on line 22900. Now, there is a worksheet T777S, which in the first section has a very simple calculation to help you figure out what is the dollar amount up to $400 that you can claim. So why is this method good and who might be thinking about this? So this method is very good because it is a very simplified method. You do not have to calculate your workspace size compared to the other method, nor do you need any supporting documents like receipts, etc. It is also easier for your employer because they don't have to issue you a T2200S, which you will need for the other method. So if you're someone that you know you haven't spent a lot of the in-home expense, or you don't have any tracking of receipts to support your claims, or maybe after you claim, it's very similar, very close to $400 anyway, then you might want to stick with this method because it's very, very straightforward and save you a lot of work. However, for most of the people I talk to, they are paying rent or they have furniture they bought or even computers that they bought just for working from home. And for them, they might want to consider the detailed expense method. So for this method, obviously, you're actually claiming all the expense that you spent that is relevant to you working from home last year. Now, to be eligible, you have to qualify for the following. You have worked from home in 2020 due to COVID-19 pandemic, or your employer require you to work from home. You worked more than 50% of the time from home for a period of at least 4 consecutive weeks in 2020, so just like the other method. You have a completed and signed form T2200S or form T2200 from your employer. Now, if you're an employee, you're probably going to get the T2200S, which is a simplified version that looks something like this. It basically just confirms from the employer that yes, this person did work from home last year. And lastly, the expense are used directly in your work during the period. And obviously, if you got reimbursed of some of your expense from your employer, you can't claim the same expense again for yourself using this method. Alright, so let's talk about how to claim. Now, CRA have actually created some tools to help you. Number one, they have an online calculator that helps you estimate the claim amount. It's a smart calculator, kind of like a quiz. So depending on what you choose, they're going to open up more options and appropriate boxes for you to fill in. So I've included a link down below. If you want, you can start playing with this right now to estimate if you were to use this method, how much more can you claim versus the flat rate method. Now, if you're going to use this, make sure you're eligible and you have the signed T2200 or the S form. Now, by now, your employer should have reached out to you to start asking if you need something like this or not. So if you haven't and you're trying to use this method, maybe send out an email just to follow up to see when do you expect to see something like this from them. The step 2 is you will need to use the T777S or the T777 form to make your claims in there. Now, the S version is probably something you'll use if you're an employee working from home because it's a simplified version made just for you to claim home expense and nothing else. In the form, it will also list all eligible expense that you can claim and what you can't claim. And last step is once you have the amount, put it on line 22900 when you file your tax. Now, if you're self-employed working from home, you have a separate website that talks about this. It's a little bit different. I've included in the link in the description below. But honestly, if you're really self-employed, I highly encourage you to file your tax, at least for last year, through an accountant. Because there might be so much more things going on that you want to make sure you get this right. Now, if you're going to use this method, you have to keep a nice record of your receipts and everything, because that's the maximum period CRA can come back and audit you. Now, if you're self-employed, you're probably very familiar with keeping a good record of your own receipt. If this is your first time doing it, I recommend a couple scanner apps, but one of them that I use is the Scanner Pro, which you'll see on the screen here. So I think I paid $3 on it to download, but it's very easy to use. It's very good. So you can actually use your phone like a scanner. And the best part is I can separate them into different folders. So for example, for 2020, I have one big section for it. And inside there are multiple folders that separate different receipts and different claims. And now, one last thing for this method to understand is, it's kind of weird, but for some reason, you can claim your rent if you're renting, but you can't claim the interest on your mortgage payment if you're making a mortgage payment. So that's something you're going to be aware. But no matter which one you are, if you're using this method, you probably will need to state your actual workspace area versus your whole living area. So make sure you have these two numbers figured out prior, and you don't want to wait until the last minute. Now, that's basically two different claim methods that you can consider. I've also included a summary that I have put onto my Facebook group on everything I talked about. So if you want to get the full file, head over to my Facebook group, which is a link in the description below. Request to join, and you will find it in the group. Alright, so I'm going to wrap up this video and talk a little bit about RRSP, because a lot of people are still thinking or contemplating and asking, hey, whether they should get it or not. So let's talk a little bit about that here. Now, if you're not sure what RRSP is and how is that beneficial to you, check out the video I have right here, which goes into detail in talking about what you need to know for RRSP. But generally here, I would suggest that right now, if you don't have your T-slip yet, at the very least, take the last pay stub from your work last year and start looking at the numbers on there, the gross income you made, how much tax is deducted, and EI, CPP, plus any EI, CERB, or CRB, or other benefits that you claimed last year. Now, for any benefits that you claim, you can actually head over to Service Canada, and you can find your T4E or other numbers on there. Keep in mind, this is not the CRA My Account. It's two completely different websites, so you're not going to find it in the CRA My Account. You have to head over to My Service Canada and find that. And that brings me to another topic that a lot of people always ask is, hey, should I do RRSP or should I do TFSA? Now, for this, you need to consider a couple of things. Number one is your income. Generally speaking, if you make $50,000 and above, an RRSP probably works better for you. And you make $50,000 or lower, a TFSA probably will do more work for you there. But also you have to consider your time horizon. For this money you're about to put away, an RRSP is supposed to be long term because you have tax consequences to take it back out, whereas TFSA is a lot simpler. So time horizon is also something you want to consider. And number three is consider any extra use for the RRSP, such as home buyer plan, lifelong learning plan, which I have talked about in my video right here. So if you haven't watched it already and you're not sure, you can check out that video. And one last thing is, if you have a spouse, you really want to look into spousal RRSP, especially if the two spouses have an income discrepancy. A spousal RRSP is a very good way for you to even out your retirement account. So when you retire and withdraw all the pension or the retirement income, you can both have the same income stream, which will help you spread out the tax evenly so you pay the minimal amount of tax. And again, for the spousal RRSP details, I've also talked about that in my previous RRSP video. Now, if you learn other tax tips and tricks that you think is useful for everyone, leave me a comment down below so everyone can see it. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, click the bell button so you get all the notification in the future. Alright, this is Jacky. I hope you found this interesting. I'll see you next time. Bye!